The relationship between France and Islam dates back to the 8th century. Now they think of Islam as a potential threat.
On a régulièrement des dégradations, des incendies, etc. sur des mosquées, des profanations de cimetières musulmans. Donc il y a une montée en puissance des actes islamophobes.
Les entrées pour travailler dans des bureaux ou n'importe où, on nous dit non. Des avocates que je connais, elles ne peuvent pas plaider, elles ont fait leurs études, elles ne peuvent pas plaider. Pourquoi? Parce qu'elles en ont foi. Tout nous est interdit.
The relationship between the French and the Muslims goes back to the 8th century. After conquering Spain, Muslims arrived in France and settled down in Septimania in the south. Later on, after the fall of Granada, the last Islamic state on the Iberian Peninsula, many Muslims took refuge in France. During World War I, there were Muslims who immigrated to France and fought shoulder to shoulder with the French. In the 1950s, hundreds of Muslims from French colonies helped the French rebuild their country that had been devastated during World War II. Despite all their history, the French and the Muslims haven't achieved an ideal status in their relationship. Currently, the majority of Muslims in France are being discriminated against, mistreated and oppressed.
On a régulièrement
They frequently vandalize Muslims' properties through putting the mosques on fire and desecrating their graves. Islamophobia acts are becoming increasingly blatant. Not only have the political leaders remained silent on this issue, they have also advocated it.
Voire même parfois encouragé.
Tout ça, c'est islamophobie.
These practices are indicative of Islamophobia in France. There is no equality here anymore. In the past, when we were young, everyone was equal, but it no longer exists, not for me at least.
Liberty, equality and fraternity, the slogan of the French Republic. It seems quite anti-racism, but there are people who confirm the fact that what is called anti-racism in France is in fact pure racism, because following the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center in New York, most French people failed to control their innate racist sentiments toward the Arab people and initiated discriminatory practices against a major religion, Islam.
En France, il y a très peu de campagnes de sensibilisation, d'éducation sur ce qu'est la religion.
Few awareness campaigns about Islam are held in France. There wasn't such fear in the past, and Muslims in European countries such as France, the Netherlands, and Spain used to preserve and express their religious beliefs. Today, when I talk to some French people, their words imply a fear of the extremists due to the threatening image they portrayed in people's minds. To them, Islam is based on violence, women who shouldn't work, people who should sit in their houses, people who do not have the right to work. This is how Islam is depicted in their minds, which makes them think, well, now that they're so violent, they can never match and integrate into the French culture.
Ils se disent que, puisque c'est comme ça, ces gens ne peuvent pas s'intégrer dans la culture française.
Il existe aujourd'hui en France une
Today, Islamophobia is so widespread in France that it encompasses a wide range of people, including political, economic, and media elites.
Économique, médiatique, etc.
La France connaît l'islam. La France, à la veille de la Première Guerre mondiale, c'était le premier empire musulman, bien avant les Ottomans, car la France a été présente en Algérie, en Tunisie, a été présente au Mali, au Niger, au Tchad, au Sénégal, partout, en Inde, Bangladesh, partout il était la France. Donc l'islam connaît la France connaît bien l'islam et les musulmans.
Since that time, the French people valued and respected Islam.
Qui, il ne faut pas l'oublier, est une société qui a été construite.
We cannot ignore the fact that this practice evolved out of the context of a colonial country, which means that it came to existence as a result of the French supremacy over its colonies. However, today, there is a practice which was more significantly intensified after the September 11 attacks. Some people say it brought on a culture shock and shaped the West's current stance against Islam and something like that. Today, there is a similar perception of Muslims, Maghrebis, and in general outsiders in France. The anti-Moroccan and anti-Algerian racists have now become anti-Muslim racists and are launching Islamophobic acts.
C'est progressivement mué en racisme anti-musulman et donc en islamophobie.
This wave of Islamophobia seems to have affected a large part of the society, but its promoters know how to forcefully justify their prejudice.
Et donc on a une stigmatisation collective des populations héritières de l'immigration.
So now, the Moroccan immigrants, who are known as the progressive societies, are living under the shadow of social stigmatization, which is practiced by groups fighting against Islam in the name of advocating women's rights, eliminating religious obscurantism, etc. On the outside, the fights are legitimate and justified, but in fact, they serve as a pretext for the French elite to stigmatize a certain religion, which is Islam.
Pour une partie des élites françaises, pour stigmatiser une religion donnée qui est l'islam.
Le racisme contre les Arabes, c'est pas bien. Le racisme contre les Noirs, c'est pas bien. Mais la critique...
Racism towards Arabs is unacceptable. Racism against the Negroes is unacceptable. But in France, people are allowed to criticize a religion. France always criticizes different religions as well as churches. Those who want to criticize Islam and the millions of Muslims in France are in fact exploiting this freedom to criticize religions. Basically, our major problem today is the power of the socialist, the right-wing and the extreme right-wing parties, who are the racist liberals.
Ce sont des pouvoirs libéraux et qui sont aussi des pouvoirs racistes.
This racism, which was based on partisan sentiments, has turned into a very dangerous practice.
Ce discours, cette rhétorique et cette stigmatisation.
This practice, this motto, this stigmatization yielded certain consequences in the everyday life of French Muslims, so that prejudicial attitudes are manifested every day. In France, physical or verbal violence against Muslims is observed almost every day.
Verbal ou physique contre des musulmans.
À partir du moment où on est musulman,
from the moment you are perceived as Muslim, you start to experience the stigmatizing attitudes of French people.
Ben voilà, c'est pas bon.
Jamila is a French citizen. She was born in France and is a Muslim. She can't understand why she, her family and the Muslim community in France are being humiliated.
Notre mode de vie, nous musulmans, c'est quoi? C'est seulement la prière.
What is different in Muslims? Our only difference is that we pray in our homes. We pray 5 times a day. Moreover, I'm more concerned about women because, like every other woman, we like to go outdoors and return to say our prayers. Like all other men in France, Muslim men work. We like to live respectfully like the way they do. We like to live normally. If we don't work, we stay at home and take care of our children, and whenever we want, we can go out and get back home for prayer. The same case holds true for children. The children go to school. What is the difference then? Is it our prayers? I think the Christians and Jews have their own way of praying. Each religion has a special way of praying. We Muslims pray 5 times a day, in the mosque or at our homes. The place doesn't really matter, but we live like other humans. Like other men, our husbands don't wear hijab. They wear pants and shirts or t-shirts at work, like everyone else. The only difference is in the Muslim women, for they put on headscarves. The difference is in our appearance.
Celles qui portent le voile, seulement la différence, c'est seulement notre voile.
In 2004, a new law was passed in France which banned the wearing of religious clothing or symbols in public schools. In 2012, the leader of the extreme right Front National Party, Marine Le Pen, overstepped the bounds and banned the wearing of hijab and kippah in public places. Fortunately, it didn't work, but Muslims and especially Muslim women's freedom remained shrouded in obscurity.
Surtout, on nous a dit non. Surtout, les piscines, on nous dit non.
They said no to our every right. When the swimming pools were opened for Jews, we were not allowed to get in gymnastics clubs, our workplace, or everywhere else because of our hijab. I know many people with law degrees who can't work because of their Islamic appearance. We're feathered here. The only thing left is the house chores. Soon, they will place conditions on how to do the house chores or the babysit. And then, in the near future, they will tell us, take off your hijab. What should we do then? Stay at home? In which case, they say, you're submissive to your husbands because you're always at home. But you did this to us. You wanted us to stay indoors because if we went out, you'd force us to take off our veils, and we don't want this to happen. We want to work like everyone else. There are Muslims with high academic education. There are Muslim women with doctoral degrees. We have all of these, but we can't work. Regardless of this matter, they tell us, you're submissive. Submissive to who? It's you who wanted us to stay at home. The government doesn't want to build a separate school for us. It's impossible. But when it comes to their religion, we have to help them financially. What should we do if we don't have a good financial situation? The government doesn't want to help us. It doesn't build a separate pool, separate gym. We should build and repair the mosques on our own. Have you noticed all these things? It reveals their hatred towards Muslims. We don't even have our own school. There are schools for Christians, for Jews, public schools, but we have to ask our co-religionists to help us build schools for Muslim children. And that's not the end of their prejudice, for they would say, this is the school of the terrorists, because it's for Muslims, and Muslim mean terrorists. What we can learn here is that the national education curriculum is based on one general principle. Islam means terrorism.
Le programme de l'éducation nationale quand même. Mais on va nous dire c'est une école de terrorisme.
Il y a une lutte qui est menée consciemment contre tout ce qui fait.
It's a pre-planned campaign against us. Against all we display. For example, they say we cannot wear hijab, we cannot pray on the streets. In fact, they are pushing for something else. They don't want to see us. We shouldn't appear as Muslims. They want to see us as ordinary French. Again, they sent their message by stipulating that if we wanted to retain our Islamic identity, we shouldn't appear in public like this. And what is their next plan?
We didn't vote for Hollande, but in fact, we voted against Sarkozy.
Perhaps
I
their
think
next move is
most
to meddle in
Muslims
our
did the same,
lifestyles.
because
Do they
Sarkozy
want
was
to
a
spy on our
threat to
meals
every
and what we
Muslim.
eat?
During the
And at
presidency
the
of
end of the day,
Sarkozy,
they will
I
reflect
regarded
on what
myself
they
to
did
be
and
in
decide
Vichy in the
that this
era
is
of
pure
Jews.
suicide,
We were
because they cannot get rid of
on
people.
every side.
Fondamentalement, en plus, c'est suicidaire. C'est suicidaire parce qu'on ne peut pas faire disparaître des gens.
The Muslim community went into mourning when Nicolas Sarkozy was elected as president. It's to overthrow Sarkozy. The election of François Hollande in May 2012 gave the Muslims a little respite.
On n'a pas voté Hollande, on a voté contre Sarkozy.
When my grandfather came to France to defend it, he never thought that one day his descendants would be mistreated. Few years later, this soldier returned to France to take part in the economization. He worked in adverse weather conditions in the snow in order to uphold the grandeur of France. It was this very soldier who became a businessman. I have a question for Mr. Le Pen.
Little did the Moroccan immigrants know what the future had in store for them when they stood shoulder to shoulder with French soldiers, defended their land, and helped them rebuild it as if it were their own. But the tragic truth is that a lot of the French have forgotten this act of valor, which recurred across
Even if they have been living in France since a long time and have children and grandchildren in France, even if they are originally French, they are seen as others. They are not French, they are different, and they are asked to integrate into the French culture, as if there is only one ultimate lifestyle, French lifestyle, in France which shouldn't change, with the French society itself undergoing constant transformation.
Économiser, à faire de l'économie, à travailler dans la neige, dans le mauvais temps, pour que la France soit toujours grande. Ce même soldat qui est devenu bâtisseur. Je demande à M. Le Pen, que faisait son grand-père quand mon père est venu de l'étranger pour défendre la patrie?
Même si elles viennent en France, vivent en France, ont des enfants en France, ont des petits-enfants en France qui sont français, restent considérés comme étant des autres. Ils ne sont pas la France, ils sont différents, ils sont un autre, et on leur demande de s'intégrer. C'est-à-dire qu'on considère qu'il existe un modèle français et on leur demande de s'intégrer. C'est-à-dire qu'on considère qu'il existe un modèle français éternel, immuable, qui ne change pas, alors que la société française elle-même change.
Neither the demand for integration issued by the political leaders nor the agreement on the part of the Muslims could stop the inimical practices of the racists. Right-wing politicians in cities surrounding Paris, namely the mayor of Hyères, demanded more of the Muslim community. As a result, the integration of Muslims into French society failed.
Mais l'intégration, elle ne fonctionne pas quand vous attendez.
The integration didn't go as expected. We thought it would cross the limits. France has successfully integrated numerous immigrants into its population. Soon, the number of the immigrants will exceed its limit, so we should find a solution to this issue. On the other hand, I wouldn't prefer the term integration, but I like the word assimilation, which is a French word. The current situation is no more tolerable, and we must adopt an urgent reform. The people should live peacefully in our land. They should be seen, otherwise it would lead to hostility, which is unfortunately happening at the present.
Qui sont malsains. Et c'est ce qui arrive aujourd'hui en France.
Certains dirigeants politiques.
Some of the French political leaders and intellectuals require Muslims to not only integrate, which itself is debatable, but also to assimilate into the French culture, in which case they will need to melt within the French community. What do they mean by to melt? The answer is brief and clear. They mean to disappear, to be swamped by the French culture. It doesn't mean that you can enrich the French community by what you really are, but it means you should live in accordance with the obligatory French model, and a religion that could help the society should be entirely ignored.
Imposé par la société française, et tout ce que vous auriez pu apporter à la société, vous devez le mettre de côté.
Alors, le Parti socialiste, la droite et l'extrême droite nous demandent...
The Socialist Party, the right wing, and the extreme right parties ask us to integrate, to assimilate. The Communist Party requires us to integrate, but this integration is paradoxical, so that they ask us to integrate and at the same time, they deny us our French citizenship and French dignity. They encourage us to integrate and become like them. But when we accept to live like them, they say, "No way, you're Arabs, you're Negroes, it's impossible." It seems that there is incompatibility between being an Arab or black and being a true French, because the French population is divided into two parts. The original French and the immigrants who came from French colonies, from Africa, Morocco, West India, and the Arab world. They have become an integral part of the French population since 400 years ago, but they are not recognized as French.
I came up with the prospect that this country would embrace us with open arms and accept us as French citizens.
They did what they wanted. Seemingly, they are not likely to let the Muslims grow and succeed like true Frenchmen. They also complain about the migrations spurred by the economic crisis in Europe. Only those who are perceived as integrated Muslims are recognized as whites.
In the test, we were required to define nation and identity, especially national identity.
Et moi-même immigrée. Je suis née en Algérie en 1971 et mon papa, pour des raisons d'emploi et économique, a migré donc en France dans les années 75. Et j'ai donc fait toute ma scolarité en France, comme la plupart de ceux de ma génération qui sont nés ou pas en France. On a intégré l'idée que la République nous considérait comme des citoyens à part entière, des citoyens français à part entière. De notre caractère de citoyen, de façon un petit peu plus marquée qu'auprès de personnes qui ne sont pas musulmanes, ou alors qui ont une immigration qui n'est pas issue du Maghreb ou des anciennes colonies. Les Italiens, les Espagnols, toute l'immigration européenne, on ne leur demande pas non plus de faire davantage la preuve de leur caractère citoyen. Il fallait que l'on explique ce que c'était que la nation et l'identité, surtout l'identité nationale.
It was in April 2005 when the French government published a guide covering the rights of French citizenship that the Muslims would have to study and take a test about. But in the guide, nothing was mentioned about the thousands of French Muslims who lived in France and were model French citizens, whom everyone, including the intellectuals, aspired to.
Il y a des musulmans très bien en France, qui sont très bien. Simplement,
there are Muslims with very good conditions in France, but if we keep granting more immigrants in our country, we will run into problems, as we are not economically strong enough to integrate them. We have a reference model for equality, and in order for this model to survive, we have to be more prudent.
The same holds for the French Jews. They are French before being Jewish, and they should comply with the rules of the French Republic.
Des musulmans en France sont parfaitement bien intégrés.
I think a major part of the Muslim population in France has successfully integrated. They work, live, and make up a part of French society without being discriminated. But as for those immigrants who don't accept the Republic rules, those who reject the integration, we should use a more efficient way to attract them and to remind them of the values of our land. They have accepted the advantages and the difficulties of the integration, so they should also respect the rights and the tasks. I think this is also important.
Respecter des droits et des devoirs, oui, ça me paraît encore important.
Les Français musulmans doivent comprendre qu'ils sont Français avant d'être musulmans, comme les Français issus de la religion judaïque. Les Français juifs sont Français avant d'être juifs et ils doivent accepter les règles de la République française.
So far, most of the Muslim community in France has agreed to adhere to the rules that require the Arabs to align themselves with French culture, but the devastating consequences of doing so have in recent years made them more hesitant to do so.
Jusqu'à aujourd'hui, l'idée, c'était de nous dire
So far, equality has been our ultimate goal, our highest ambition. But today, we raise this question: equality for who? Equality at the expense of losing our religion and becoming French? We don't want this. French citizenship, French identity is based on Christian identity, and being white, Christian and European entails anti-Semitist feelings, because the Jews are not Christians. Yet the racism toward Jews is not as blatant as it is toward Muslims, because the Jews have been accepted as French citizens. The Jews have pervaded the mental structure of French people, but the blacks, Arabs and Muslims are excluded from the French society.
Encore plus les Noirs, les Arabes et les musulmans.
The intolerant nature of some of the political and social sectors of France gave rise to the phenomenon of the Islamic awakening, which led to the Muslims rejecting the integration and instead demanding that France respect their culture and religion, which played a major part in the historical development of France as a republic country.
Yet, we've always been the target of their antagonistic slogans, such as, "You are not like us." Let's get this straight and ask ourselves,
we no longer
who
want
is
to
us?
integrate.
Does
we
it
want
refer
them to
to
respect
the
our
people
culture,
who live in
our
France,
legacy,
or
and to
is it
respect
the
and value
white
our
French
identity,
who are
which is
not
defined by
Muslims?
our religion.
If it refers to the
Islam.
non-Muslim French,
Although
then
Islam
the
is
slogan is
frequently
patently
despised,
advocating
to us, it's always
Islamophobia.
dignified.
We should be
That's why
plain
we
and
say,
admit that the
okay,
French
we're French
society
citizens.
has yet to
But at the
develop
same
and
time,
change for
we're
better.
Arabs,
And today,
Muslims and Africans.
Islam is an
We are
integral
strong
part
and we have
of
the
French
right
community.
and the power to
We
change
shouldn't
the
ignore the
destiny of
fact
France
that they are
as we
French,
did before.
so they
It
should
was our
continue to
presence
live
and
here
not a
in
political
France
project
because
that
they were
made
born
France
here.
what it is now.
Et transformé par notre présence.
Aujourd'hui, l'extrême majorité des musulmans de France sont français. Ils sont français, ils sont nés en France.
I think that the solution does exist within everyone's mind, in everyone's heart. I'm Muslim and my religion has taught me that every human is free to choose their own religion. So we need to overcome the bigotry to reach God.
Un travail de déconstruction intellectuelle à faire, qui est de dire le nous, c'est qui? Nous, les gens qui vivons en France, ou nous, les Français blancs qui ne sommes nous, les gens qui vivons en France, ou nous, les Français blancs qui ne sommes pas musulmans. Si le nous, c'est les Français blancs non musulmans, bah effectivement, on va encourager la stigmatisation et l'islamophobie. Si on a ce travail de dire la société française, comme toutes les sociétés, elle évolue, elle change, et aujourd'hui les musulmans font partie intégrante de la société française, ils sont français, ils sont là, ils ne vont pas partir parce qu'ils sont nés ici.
La solution, à mon avis, elle est dans la tête des gens. Elle est dans le cœur des hommes. Je suis musulman. Moi, religion me dit, chacun est libre de vivre ou de ne pas vivre sa religion. Donc il faut transcender, dépasser le dogme pour pouvoir arriver au Verbe de Dieu.